Welcome to Sandbox FOMO5 from Buro Happold. Each week, we pick short snippets from our most recent episode for your listening pleasure. These quick listens could be valuable insights, thought-provoking elements, or even practical advice that will no doubt enrich your life and knowledge. I have learned so much since I started hosting this podcast. For example, I was fascinated by Duncan Reid in episode 1 talking about managing water the way we manage our finances, calling for a water version of Martin Lewis. Ewan Morris explaining that solar power is a Victorian vision, and of course Colin, in episode 2, revealing that you can order bees and worms through the post. What an eye-opener that was. I know now what to get all my relatives for Christmas. And with that, we make a beeline to the role of the individual. There's nothing little old you and me can do, is there, dear listener? Why should I, for instance, be cultivating a garden to encourage growing a buddleia for the butterflies when my neighbour is hoovering their newly installed plastic lawn? We should never forget the power of the individual and local community action. Lead by example. Listen to what our experts are saying. There's always something, however small, that we can all contribute to make things just that little bit better.
Educate yourself, understand how much water you are using and what particular things are using the most water. Talk to your friends about it and educate other people about it. I come from Australia, which I mentioned earlier, and when I was younger, we went through the millennium drought, and actually during school, we got taught how to turn our tap off when we were brushing our teeth. And when I see a tap running, the discomfort in my whole body that I feel when I see that, I just can't stand it. And it stems from that education from a very young age. Talk to your friends, try to reduce your water as much as possible.
I think this is something we inherited from the Victorians. This notion, this myth really, that innovation is the product of individual genius. People like Nikola Tesla at the end of the 19th century portraying themselves as these kind of idiosyncratic, asocial disruptors who are going to change the way that the world was, and everybody needed to sort of go through them towards the future. And in a lot of ways, that's very much where we tend to think about innovation now, but it has to involve disruption, it has to involve radical change. So it's actually really good to hear both Ben and Maddie talking about the need to embed new technologies in communities, to work together collectively, because the reality is that the myth always was a myth. It takes huge collective effort to energize the world. And to do that successfully in the future, I mean, we have to organize together. We have to think seriously about what different communities' energy needs are, how that can be achieved in ways that work for them, as opposed to ways that work for self-identified disruptors, so to speak. We incentivize ourselves to do things rather than imagine that, oh yes, it's somebody else's job. Some other great innovator is going to come along and solve the future for us. Well, they're not. It's not in their capacity to do that. We can only create equitable energy futures ourselves for ourselves.
Perfection is the enemy of doing, and even just having a water butt, it's kind of low tech, it's old tech, but it does actually just retain water. It's not thrilling and exciting, and it hasn't got a screen showing you how much money you've saved, but it does actually make a material impact. And just scaling whatever solution you have for water retention, whether it be a really big water garden, a small water butt, it all actually makes a difference. And some utilities are actually paying for homeowners to install water butts because it helps them and it helps the burden on everyone else. So I would say doing anything is a positive, and please don't be deadlocked into doing nothing because it isn't new, it isn't exciting. Because again, as you said, Andy, part of the sewer network in the Thames was built kind of hundreds of years ago, and that still works really nicely. So it doesn't need to be new to be exciting, positive.
So there we have it. We individuals have more agency than we think. And the more active we are as individuals, the more, it would seem, we can come together as communities to effect ever greater change.
It has to be shared as a kind of, this is something we want to do as a society. It's important to all of us, and therefore we will redivert some of the nation's funds towards it. But on a personal level, basically, don't go for fast fashion, reuse clothes, have slightly shorter showers, think about your gardening habits, because that will probably use a lot more water than you realize.
I think the same goes with, as per the climate emergency, where every little makes a difference in terms of how much carbon we're using and how much we're doing to offset that. The same applies to nature. So as Tamsin said, I totally agree. I think people inspiring each other to consider how nature affects them, planting things on their balcony, in their garden, on a small scale is going to make a big difference. So I think the individual has a lot of collective power to make a real difference, especially in a city context where, obviously, as we're saying, a lot of it is largely grey infrastructure. So if you've got individuals that are looking after their green spaces and improving them, that's only going to spread out and fan out and be very much positive.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that quick dip into our last episode of Sandbox. Don't forget to subscribe to follow the show. You'll find Sandbox in all the usual places. If you want to join the conversation on social media, just use #BHSandbox. We'd love to receive your thoughts or feedback, but also any other subjects you'd like to hear discussed in the future on Sandbox.